Hello everyone, myself Professor Amrish Bhavsar, Sri Swaminarayan Institute of Technology, but today we are discussed about the design of structure. For the understanding of design of structure, first of all we have to understand about the structure. So what do you mean by structure? We know about the structural analysis, so we must have to knowledge about the structure. The basic thing of the structure means it is the combination of different elements. Here we are talking about the building structure. That's why we have to knowledge about the structural elements. We have four types of structural elements like slab, beam, column and footing. The purpose of these elements are important and different. First, I am talking about the slab. The function of the slab is to cover the whole building and resist the load comes from the top and transfer it to the beam. Number two, beams. The function of beam is to resist the load coming from the slab and walls and safely transfer it to the column. Number three, column. The function of column is the load which is coming from the beam and transfer it to the footing. And the function of footing is the load come from the column must be transferred by footing to the soil. So this combination arrangement of these four structural elements is making skeleton for the building which is known as the structure. We are talking about the structure, but in this scenario we have two type of structural material like RCC and steel. We all aware about the RCC structure. We all aware about the RCC structure. But we haven't frequently seen the steel structure because it is used in industrial areas. Right? So in this lecture I am talking about the steel structure and we deeply discussed about the steel structure. In the steel structure there are all the elements must be made up of steel elements. So in our mind there is a question why we are using this steel and what is steel. So for that we have to discuss about the structural steel. We know there are three type of steel available in the market. First one, cast iron, that is also steel. Number two, wrought iron, which is also steel. And number three, structural steel, that is also steel. Right? So in these three types, why we are choosing structural steel? Because as we compare about these three types, in there is a carbon content in the material is different, and from that we can justify the properties of the material is different for these three types. Let's see. Cast iron. Cast iron having a number of properties, but which is not used in a building. Why? Because some of the properties are not suitable for the long life of the building. So, cast iron is used as a pipe that we know about the CI pipes. Number two, wrought iron. It is also not used in building because some of the properties are not suitable for the building. So, cast iron is used for making of chain, uh, hook of cranes, and sleeper of the railway track. So, this wrought iron is used for these different places. But structural steel is commonly used for a building because it has high strength, high ductility, high weldability, high tensile strength. These the common property is most important for the using of the steel in building. But there is a one thing that is not suitable for the building, that is rusting of the structural steel. But for then we can maintain that regularly by using paints. So the overall property of the structural steel is most suitable for the building. That's why we are choosing structural steel as a building material. Now, which kind of structural steel and how it is used in building? For that, here I am going to show you two peaks for the building. Let's see. Here, first figure that indicate the column and beam of steel material, and number two is the warehouse. There is also we are using steel column and the steel beams, and it is covered by the steel plate or else cast iron sheets, right? Okay, now the advantages of this structural steel is most important. In that, first we are taking advantage, and after that we are discussed about the some of the disadvantages of this structural steel. So, number one, high strength to weight ratio. This structural steel having high strength per weight ratio. For this reason, the dead weight of the structural steel is relatively small as compared to RCC. This property makes the steel very attractive structural material for high rise building, long span bridges, structure loaded on a soft ground, and the structure loaded in high seismic areas where force acting on a structure due to earthquake are general proportional to the weight of the structure. Let me explain this thing. Earthquake, we know the earthquake. Earthquake is the directly attacking on the building. But if mass of the building increase, then acceleration of the building is increased, and which is most dangerous for the collapse of the building. But the steel structure is a lightweight structure, so the chances of earthquake attacking is very low as compared to RCC structure. Number two, the most important thing is ductility. First of all, what is ductility? Right? Steel can undergo large plastic deformation before failure. Thus, the providing large reverse strength. This property is referred as a ductility. Means, suppose here earthquake force is acting, then the building is deflect horizontally. In that case, if RCC structure is there, then it will be collapsed for the smaller deflection. But in steel structure, due to high ductility, it can deflect more as compared to RCC. Right? That's why ductility is most important and it use key role in the buildings. It is also resist shock. Due to high ductility, building can resist heavy shock. It usually show large visible deflection before failure. Right? Next, steel shows elastic behavior up to relatively high and usually well defined stress level. Also, it contract to RCC. Steel properties do not change considerably with time. Suppose in RCC building, when time is go and go, then the rusting of reinforced steel which is used in RCC structure, it is damaged. But in steel structure, there is a limited chances of the damage and it can't change its property. Number three, erection is very fast. Suppose if we are compared the RCC structure with steel, then in RCC structure there should be a minimum time for setting of the concrete should be used. Suppose for the casting and setting of this concrete, slab will take around 14 days. Beam can take around 10 days. So, in steel structure, we can make fast erection because there is no need to take time for setting. We can directly welding the structural members and erection can done. Quality of construction. In RCC structure, there is a chances of error due to casting. But in steel structure, there is a limited tolerance because we must have to joint by welding or else bolting. So, for that, it should be minimum tolerance. Easy of repair. The steel structure in general can be repaired quickly and easily. Suppose some of the member of the steel structure is lightly damaged, then we can remove that member and repair that member easily. But in RCC structure, we can't do that. We must have to demolish first and after that recasting. Prefabrication. Steel is highly suitable for prefabrication and mass production. Means we can assemble all the members in factories, and after that we can directly set up that assembly in particular site. But in RCC we can't do that, we must have to cast in situ. Repetitive use, steel can be reused after structure is disassembled. But in RCC, we can't do that because we must have to break down that members. But in steel structure, we can safely remove the member and reuse that member in somewhere else. Here are some disadvantages of the structural steel. Like first one, fireproofing. Steel structure having melting point around 1300 degree. So in the case of fire, the member of the structural steel can melting. For that we must require fire protection of that structure. Wall. In steel building, there is cladding and dividing walls are made up of masonry. Sometimes we can use cement sheet as well as GI sheet, galvanized iron sheet as a cladding. But in structure, interior wall panel must be made up by masonry. Foundation. Foundation can't made by the steel because the foundation is in the substructure and there is a moisture in earth. So due to that moisture, if structural steel foundation is there, it can rust, corroded. So in that case we must needed RCC foundation. Tolerance. In structural fabrication, specified tolerance are very small as we discussed earlier. So for that we must need highly technical skilled labor. Connection. In steel, welding and bolted connection are there. For that we also needed technical skill labor with proper training. Cost. In many cases, cost of the steel structure work out to be higher as compared to concrete structure. Means, as we discussed, there is lightweight structure of steel structure as compared to RCC. So the weight is less, then dead load is also less, and the member must be smaller as compared to RCC because weight is less. But in some condition, steel structure having number of members needed for the stability, like we need a bracing system must be provided for the resisting the wind force. In that case, cost of the structure can be higher. So in this lecture we have discussed about the structural steel, why we can use that, what is the role of the structural steel, and the main advantages and disadvantages of the structural steel. In this lecture, we have discussed a lot of things. Based on that, there is some most important questions should be there, like why structural steel is important. Question number 2, advantages of steel structure, and question number 3, disadvantages of steel structure. So, in a next lecture, we discussed the detailed properties of the structural steel, right? And the load which is acting on the structure, which discussed in next lecture. So, thank you.